5 savoirs depends heavily on cultural comparison between cultural groups, but also within cultural groups. There's lots of variety, and this has already come up in your discussions. And I think maybe the main central concept is decentering. And what that means is making the strange familiar. Why do these people do this? But thinking a little bit further, I can start to see why these people do this. On the other hand, you want to make the familiar strange. You take your own culture, your own way of doing things, kind of, this is the normal, natural, best way to do it. But why do we do it this way? So putting your own culture and different cultures on the same ground. So that's gonna be underlying a lot of what I say in the next few minutes. Okay, going on to the specific savoirs finally. The attitudes is savoir-être, and what Byram considers the most important attitudes to be are curiosity, openness, and readiness to suspend disbelief about other cultures. Why? Why do they do that? And belief in one's own culture. Of course, this is the normal way to do things. But suspend your disbelief and belief. Think why, in both cases, try to put them on the same ground. So in other words, reduce ethnocentric judgments. Oh, and by the way, these slides will be available to you later.
We hope. Inshallah.
So, how can we promote this? It's already, some of the things you said have already, you've already mentioned it, but some examples from Byram and his colleagues' work is comparative cultural activities. For example, talking about school routines in different societies. I'm talking about holidays. I'm talking about food traditions. All these things are very easy to talk about, and students love to talk about them. Empathy building exercises. For example, role plays where maybe half the students have to try to step into another cultural perspective and then maybe afterwards reverse it. And trying to make your classroom into a safe discussion space so that students are okay feeling vulnerable. So it's good if students can share stereotypes and then challenge them critically. But you need a very safe discussion atmosphere in order to do that. Okay, so my plan is I want you to talk about these things that you have done. Could be some of the examples I just gave, or could be something totally different. Or if you haven't done, that you might be able to do in the future to raise your students' savoir-être, curiosity, openness, decentering. But because of time, I'm going to do 2 of these at once. So the second one is savoirs, which is simply knowledge, but the important knowledge of others, PPP, which I'll say in a minute, and social identities. So we want to have knowledge of other social groups, perspectives, and that's a little bit challenging because it's inside of their head. Their practices, a little bit less challenging because it has physical manifestation, you can see it. And products is maybe not as important, but it's easy to talk about, and it's obviously physical in the environment. So these kinds of things, especially perspectives and practices of various social groups, are important, and knowledge of how social identities function. This is complex, won't be able to say more about it today, but you know every interaction you go into, you bring more than one social identity, and you're aware, you perceive the social identity of the person you're talking to, either accurately or inaccurately, or some of each. But those kinds of things are good to focus on. So how can we do this? Some of the ideas from Byram are authentic materials dealing with diverse English-speaking cultures, songs, ads, advertisements, films, social media posts, so many possibilities, and probably, what I'm going to find out in a minute, probably you've already done a lot of this. And varieties of English-speaking cultures worldwide, not just American or British, but there's so many cultures where English has an important role. Just two examples: Nigerian English, good to talk about, Jamaican English, and many, many more. And finally, suggestions that he gave on many research projects and presentations on cultural practices. Of course, this takes much more organizing, much more time on the teacher's part, much more time on the student's part, but worthwhile. Okay, and so I would like to ask you about these things. What have you done or could do, and I'm sure you have done a lot and can do more, so I'd like you to talk about this. I put these both up again, these ideas, just to jog your memory. Maybe this is the kind of stuff you've done, maybe not. And maybe you have some much better ideas, but I'd like you to talk about these in your groups. And let's focus on savoir-être in the three groups in front, and savoirs in three groups in back. So, three groups in front, talk about any of these things you've done or would like to do, or something different, maybe even better. And the three groups in back, talk about any of these things that you've done or could do, or other ideas that you have. It's time, 5 minutes.